Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, How to Align Your Sales and Marketing Efforts for Maximum Results. I'm Amber Noble, a marketing specialist here at Barracuda MSP, and I'm happy to be moderating today's session. Today, I'm joined by Angela Leavitt, founder of Mojo Marketing. As an accomplished entrepreneur and speaker, Angela has become a frontrunner in the telecom and IT marketing industry. During today's educational webinar, Angela will highlight how misalignment between sales and marketing can be a major detriment to the business and proven ways to fight against it. Before we get started, some brief housekeeping. During the webinar, if you have any questions, feel free to share them using the questions or chat panel to the right of the Zoom webinar screen. At the conclusion of the webinar, you'll be prompted to complete a brief polling survey. Please take a moment to tell us what you think so we can continually improve the content and quality of our online events. Now, without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Angela to begin today's presentation. Take it away, Angela.
Thank you, Amber. As always, super excited and honored to be here with you. I think this is maybe my fourth or fifth time presenting with you guys, so always a lot of fun. And this is a topic that I've become extremely passionate about, especially in the last year or so. So I'm really excited to share these things with you guys. Before we get started, I just had a couple things to run through as well. Thank you, Amber, for the intro. But just so you guys know, who are here on the call, I have an interesting background because, like, before I was a marketer, I was actually in sales, right? And so I think that that really helps me to have really good perspective on how sales and marketing should work together. I've been in the telco IT space since 2007, so I've really seen a lot of evolution within our industry, how cloud came to be, how all of these technologies are converging, and how sales and marketing have really had to shift over the last few years. It was in 2010 that I left and started Mojo with the intention of really kind of just freelancing for a while and then going to work, perhaps for another carrier or company, but really saw the need within the industry to provide services to specifically to telecom and IT. And so that's kind of where we've been focused. And just to give you an idea of the kinds of customers we've worked with, over 200 in the last 9 years. So just as Amber mentioned, happy to stay on as long as possible to answer any and all questions that you have. If you are active on Twitter, feel free to tweet, tag Barracuda, tag us, and always happy to share the slides with you as well. So feel free to just email me afterwards with any comments that you have, and if you'd like these slides, happy to provide them. So before we get started, why don't we launch the first polling question? I'm really just curious who's on the call, right, and what your role is. So I can go ahead and do that. So just let me know, are you primarily responsible for sales, for marketing, for both, something else? We'll just let this go for a minute here. Okay, interesting. Looks like the majority, let me share the results with you guys. Looks like the majority of people are in sales or are in the owner capacity. So cool, very interesting. Not many marketing folks on the call today, which is fine. I'm really glad that those of you who are in the executive and in the sales role want to understand this process. And then let's take a look at the second question is, based on where you are today, where would you say your alignment sits? Like, are you very well aligned, pretty well, somewhat, or not at all, right? Just kind of want to take a temperature here and see where everyone is at. Let that go here for another few seconds. Okay. Well, good. It looks like obviously you're probably here because you are looking for some help. We've got a couple people who say they're very well aligned, but the 80% falling into like somewhat but needs attention. So good. You are in the right place. Great. So let me get back to my slides. Okay. Are we back to slides? Okay, good. Great. So I have a feeling most of you here on the call can relate to this slide quite well, that in traditional companies, and if you've worked for any company larger than say 10 employees, you've probably experienced this rife between sales departments and marketing departments. There are a lot of finger pointing going on, seem to be at odds with each other. Sales primarily saying, marketing doesn't really do anything. They don't understand what we do. They provide me really low quality leads. It's a waste of my time. We should just take this, this budget that's going into marketing and hire more salespeople, right? From the marketing side, we get, oh, these salespeople are really lazy. They don't follow up on the leads that we're providing them. They don't feed us any information, they don't give us any feedback. They don't really appreciate what it is that we do. They just, want us to create flyers all the time or put on events, and that's not really how marketing works. So you get the idea, right? Lots of contention that can exist between the two, which is really sad because really we're all trying to accomplish the same thing. Like both departments are responsible for growing the business. And in addition to that, like this misalignment is actually very, very costly. Some interesting stats I'm going to share with you. The losses due to decreased sales productivity added to wasted marketing efforts due to these misalignments cost companies $1 trillion a year, right? So this is not a cheap endeavor that we are engaging in. 79% of leads generated never convert into sales, right? So lots of effort going there. This one was, I almost fell out of my seat when I saw this one. Of the leads that get patched to salespeople, 73% are never contacted, right? So those of you that have marketing departments and budgets know, like you work very, very hard to generate those leads. So to see this number so high is a bit of a shock, right? And you can see why $1 trillion a year is wasted. The good news is that organizations that do this right, that zoom in and fix this problem, have a huge advantage over those who do not, and lots of things that can yield immediate results. 27% faster 3-year profit growth, closed 38% more deals, and achieved 208% higher revenue. And the good news is too that it doesn't, this doesn't take like miracle working. Like there are very simple things that you can do to align, right? And that's why I'm so passionate about this and so excited to share this information, because like a lot of what I'm going to share with you today is kind of logical and it should be kind of second nature. But a lot of companies don't think of it, and we've got these like separate silos working independently. And just by closing that gap, we can make huge differences to the bottom line of the company. So part of the reason we have this misalignment is that sales and marketing fundamentally have changed, especially over the last 5 to 10 years. And the reason that they have fundamentally changed is because buyer behavior has changed. So people aren't buying in the same way that they used to buy. It used to be that marketing's job was top of funnel, right? So marketing's job was like, hey, just build the brand, and when someone expressed interest, they will raise their hand, and at that point, sales will take over, right? And there's like pretty clean handoff there. And what has happened is that buyers are waiting much longer. They are getting themselves through the funnel much farther than ever before. And so this is causing the lines to blur a little bit. So it's no longer marketing's job to just build awareness and interest. Marketing has to be a little bit more involved in the process through the end. Think about, just the last major purchase you made. One example I like to give is the car I bought a couple years ago. When I bought a car out of college, I didn't really know what I wanted. Like I graduated in 2002. When I bought that car, I drove to the lot, right? And I let the car salesman show me around, and I test drove a whole bunch of different cars, and took several days, if not weeks, to visit several dealerships and kind of, have several salespeople talk to me and show me a lot of different cars, and then I bought one. When I bought a car 2 years ago, I knew exactly what I wanted. I'd done the research, I'd read the reviews, I was tracking it, tracking that specific car myself online. When one came up at a dealership within the price range that I wanted to pay, I drove to that dealership specifically, I test drove that car, and then I purchased it, right? So the behavior has totally changed. Like I was all the way through, I'd pretty much made up my mind when I raised my hand, right? And this is what we're seeing. We're seeing the same thing happen in the IT space, in the telecom space. I had a conversation just a couple weeks ago with an IT consultant who told me, I have a customer, and he called me a couple weeks ago and said, hey, I was online and purchased an SD-WAN solution. Can you help me implement it? And he was incredibly shocked that his customer that he felt he had this great relationship with would go off and purchase something without consulting him, right? But this is how buyer behavior has changed. And so I'm spending quite a bit of time here because I hope this sinks in. If your company is still kind of operating on the old way, you're going to have some struggles, and you're not going to understand why your sales and marketing efforts aren't paying off. You really need to look at, have you adjusted your approach to the way that buyers are buying today? And if not, then that's where you need to focus first. So given this change, there are 4 steps that we're going to go over today and how you ensure that your sales and marketing are perfectly aligned. The first thing we're going to get into is setting common goals. The second thing is going to be like how you execute on your plans, and like how you make sure that that alignment is there throughout the execution, how you analyze and measure, and then how you communicate across teams. So this is kind of the outline of what we will be going over. So one question I always like to ask like clients or potential clients of us is like, has the sales plan and the marketing plan been executed and created together, or were they done separately? In most companies that we speak with, the sales team is kind of just pretty disconnected from the marketing team, right? And so the marketing team is not aware of what the sales goals are, or if they are, it's just extremely high level. And the sales team is not aware of what marketing is trying to achieve. So first things first, strategy and planning should be done together. This comes from your highest level. If you're trying to grow your company by 20% this year, what does that break down into? How many new customers do you need to onboard? And at what monthly payment? Okay, if we need 10 customers to hit our objective, well, how many at-bats do we need to get that number of customers? Like backing your way out, right? And this way, if everyone is clear on what the plan is, then marketing can say, okay, our job is to generate, 100 qualified leads this year that we can pass off to the sales team. Now the marketing team can get to work on what they need to do to accomplish that. But first and foremost, strategy and goals planning done together. The second is agreeing on who your ideal buyer is and who exactly you are targeting. Another area that is just very commonly misaligned. If marketing has determined that, you know, the top buyer persona is the IT director of an enterprise, but the sales team is saying, no, actually, like we're getting better results going after small, like medium business owners, that's a huge difference in strategy, right? And so being in agreement on who is the ideal buyer and who exactly you are targeting, so that all of your efforts are in conjunction there. The next is to agree on some basic definitions so that everyone is using the same language. Typically, in in the marketing world, we see terms like MQL, SQL. So a marketing qualified lead being like, hey, someone took a positive action somewhere. So maybe they filled out a form on your website, they downloaded something. They're showing buying interest, right? Whereas the sales qualified lead typically is defined as something like they're ready for a sales conversation, or they're definitely going to be put into the pipeline, right? You're also going to want to define KPIs that both teams can agree on, right? So again, kind of going back to what are we trying to accomplish in terms of business growth, and how do we back out of that to make sure that we have all of the most meaningful KPIs possible. An example of this is, sometimes marketers, like we have so many things that we're measuring, there's so many like levers that we're pulling, that sometimes you can get a little lost in like, okay, well, we increased our web traffic by 20% last month. Well, awesome. What happened as a result, right? Like, did we get more leads out of it? Were they better leads? So making sure that we're measuring the right things that are going to be meaningful to both sides. Okay, continuing with common goals. As I mentioned earlier, sales plan and marketing plan being done in conjunction. No longer can we operate in separate silos. Looking at and both sides should be communicating that, right? So marketing team knows exactly what sales is trying to accomplish, and vice versa. On the marketing side of the house, the big things the marketing team should be focused on are, building the brand recognition, building the reputation, making sure that the brand is solid. Obviously, higher quantity of leads, but even more important, higher quality of leads, right? Then they're also going to be looking at nurturing programs. So it's no longer, as we talked about earlier, no longer the case that someone that raises their hand is ready for a sales conversation. One of the seminars I sat in on a couple months back said something like 90% of customers who become leads are not ready for a sales conversation, right? So what do you do if a lead comes in and you follow up with them and they're not ready? If you do not have a nurturing program in place, you are missing out on 90% of potential business that you could harvest in a couple of months, right? If your nurturing program is in place. So this is something that we're seeing trending across marketing. All the conferences we're attending, it's no longer about generating leads. It's about who's the best at nurturing leads, who's the best at building the relationship while that buyer is kind of going through the phases on their own, right? How do we automatically guide someone from that awareness stage to interest to consideration until they're ready to chat? And so that's where a lot of marketing efforts should be going. If that is working well, then sales can be focused on increasing their close ratio. So providing a better sales experience when that customer is ready for that conversation, ensuring that they are, approaching it as a very helpful, informative, consultative approach, and then reducing time to close. So with these things all kind of working together, this is where we see big lift in numbers. Okay, so that was setting our plan. Now we're going to talk a little bit about how you execute the plan. the first thing you want to look at is ensuring that you can automate wherever possible. We're going to talk a little bit more about what this looks like, but having automation in place, whether it's communication or scheduling, things like that, is going to make everyone's lives a lot easier and make sure that these things are happening without the necessity of a human to be in place. We've talked a little bit about nurturing. This is something you're gonna hear me hammer today, right? So ensuring that those leads who are coming in are being communicated with in a way that is personal, effective, and helpful, right? Not just every 2 weeks showing up saying like, hey, are you ready to buy yet? Are you ready to buy yet? That's not how people are buying today. Someone expressed interest in what you do. They're not ready yet. Maybe in a couple weeks, you send them a link to a white paper or an ebook, and then a couple of weeks later, a link to a relevant blog post. Hey, we thought this might be interesting for you. Nurturing the relationship in a helpful, informative manner. And again, that can be accomplished through automation. You'll also want to make sure that you have a good process for marketing handing off leads to sales. So what does that look like? How is it communicated? As we saw in the stat earlier in the presentation, 73% of leads handed off to sales don't get followed up on. Like, why, right? Where is that breakdown occurring, and how do you fix it? Again, some automation in this regard can take place. And if sales is having a conversation and saying, okay, this is definitely a qualified lead, but not quite ready, what's the process for handing it back to marketing to say, okay, marketing, like, why don't you guys incubate this lead, nurture this lead for me until they're ready? So ensuring that your team is very clear on how those handoffs occur, what the steps are, and who's kind of responsible for those things. This is where a lot of balls get dropped, and this is where we see a lot of that fallout, right? So ensuring that this is nice and tight. Also, some tools that you're going to want to execute your plan. Content, right? You can hardly talk about marketing these days without referencing content marketing, but this is how people are moving themselves through the funnel, right, or through the pipeline. So they're reading reviews, they're watching videos, they're attending webinars, they're reading blog posts, downloading ebooks, things like that. So as an organization, going back to understanding your ideal buyer, what that buyer is looking for, what questions they have, and ensuring that you have content to answer those questions for each stage that they might be in. That's going to help your marketing team build out these nurture campaigns and ensure that they're working properly. You need to make sure that you have a CRM, right? One that's really robust, and it's shocking to me how many companies we talk to in 2019 that don't have a robust CRM, or if they have it, they're not really using it. They're still kind of operating out of their email or a spreadsheet. There's so many, and there's so many that are free or practically free, that this is a must, right? Some sort of email marketing tool to ensure that you can stay in front of people in the right way, and even better if all of those things have some marketing automation. We're going to talk about what kinds of tools do all of this on the very next slide, but just kind of wanted to set the stage here. So here are some of those tools that we would recommend. If you are not on a tool that allows your sales and marketing to work together, that functions as a CRM as well as a marketing automation platform, this might be one of the things that you want to take a look at. I know it's very difficult to make transitions of any kind, and there's a lot of tools within our industry that are very specifically set up for the industry, like ConnectWise or other platforms like that. However, from our experience, they're not quite set up to do what we're talking about today, which is connecting your sales and marketing so that you can operate as a cohesive machine. These are some of the ones that are popular. HubSpot's a big one. They're one of the largest out there, as well as Marketo. Pardot is one that is owned by Salesforce. So if you are a Salesforce user, Pardot might make the most sense for you. Those three all carry pretty hefty price tags. So we found one, and we've been using one for ourselves, for our clients, called Hatchbuck, that does a lot of the same things. It might not have all the bells and whistles, but the price point is much more reasonable. If you're looking at like an entry point for things like that, then if you haven't been on automation software, then I would say give that one a look. Now, you don't just get the connection of a CRM and an email automation software with this. You also get incredible insights into the behaviors of every single person on your database, right? So imagine, I know I've got mostly sales and executives on the phone today. So imagine that you can log into your CRM, and let's say you can organize them by a score, and the score is assigned based on their activity. So this happens for me, right? Like I'm the sole, for now, I am the sole person responsible for sales for my own company. And we have a database of about 5,000 people. In addition to sales, like I run the company, right? So I have very limited time that I can spend on sales efforts. When I log into my platform, I can sort every single contact by what is called the lead score. And the lead score is assessed by their activity. So they visit a web page, they get a point. They download something, they get 5 points. They attend an event or a webinar, they get 10 points, right? And this is all built into the automation. So in a click, I can see who is hot and who is worthy of the time and attention, the very limited time and attention that I have to put towards this. Now, imagine yourself if you are a full-time salesperson and you have a database assigned to you, and instead of shooting in the dark, you've got all of this insight into exactly where your prospects have been on your website, how much time they've spent, what emails they've opened, what they've clicked on. You know, it's an incredible amount of insight that will make your sales process shrink, right? Because you will know exactly what you're dealing with going into a sales call, and you'll also know exactly who to spend your most time with. Now, setting this stuff up is time intensive, right? Like you have to think through all these things. You have to think through how you want to score your leads, how you want to have your workflow set up, how you want your nurtures set up. But once you are there, it is in place, right? And it does all these things automatically, and so you're saving yourself hours. And perhaps the best thing is that like having your sales and marketing teams work out of the same platform with the same objectives, you really reduce your chance of having that fallout in the handoff process, right? Because so much can be like automated within the platform. You can have something where, hey, if someone hits a score of 20, automatically assign the rep a task to call and follow up. Or they hit a score of 30, automatically send them X email that invites them to set up an appointment, right? Like just anything you can imagine, you can automate and have these things crossing lines between sales and marketing. Some other tools you may want to consider. We love Zapier. Zapier allows you to create what they call zaps between all kinds of different platforms. So, you know, just further integrations into any other tools that you're working with. And then the other one are, you know, online scheduling tools, calendar tools. These things are really effective. So I'm going to show you how an example of this. And yeah, the idea is like, wow, this stuff took me some time to set up, but it is working while I sleep, which is awesome. Quick stat here, 80% of marketing automation users saw an increase in leads. So here's an example of how this looks like on our end. And this is just one example of how automation can be used and like sort of that connection between marketing and sales. So if someone is on our website and they fill out a contact form like, hey, I'd like to set up a call with you, they're automatically emailed by me, right? It looks like it's coming from me, and it says, hey, thank you so much for filling out the form. I'd love for you to just answer a few questions for me, and then we'll get started. And it gives them a link to the survey. So they click on the link, they fill out the survey. The survey is actually attaching more information to the contact record. So I am asking things like, are you an MSP or a telecom agent or a carrier provider? Like basically, who are you? What's your time frame? What's your budget? Just basic sort of pre-qualification questions. Again, all of that stuff attached to the contact record. Some of those things are tagged. Once they fill that out, they get another email from me that says, thank you so much, I got your survey. Please feel free to select a time on my calendar for us to chat. And then they click on the link and the appointment is set. So this happens for me probably 1 to 2 times a week, where things are just happening within our database and appointments are showing up on my calendar, right? And the appointment shows up and I see the email come in, and then I go into my platform and I can see who it is, what the, all the information that they filled out, and I prep myself for the call. Again, this is all being done without me touching anything, right? It's all built into the automation, and this is sales and marketing working together. Hopefully this is somewhat inspiring. Some other things that happen, like I said, you can kind of come up with anything. So once they have filled out, this is the screenshot where you can see they filled out our prospect call survey. It updates the contact record. It sets them as a prospect. It sets their temperature to warm. It assigns me as a sales rep. It creates a deal in our pipeline. And then it creates a task for me to follow up and schedule a call. Right, so this is just an example of how a software like this can work. Okay, great. So now we're going to transition into measuring and analyzing. So we've got your processes in place, your sales team, your marketing team, they're working together. We've got these campaigns running. So now we're going to want to make sure that we are constantly evaluating what we're doing so that we can continue to refine and improve our process and improve our results. So these are some things that those of you on the phone that are the salespeople want you to keep in mind as what you need to communicate to the marketing team, right? So in most cases, the marketing team is not on the phone with you. They're not on the front lines, right? And that's something that probably should be corrected, and we'll talk about that too. But keep in mind, like, you are on the front line, right? And so you need to communicate to marketing what it is you are hearing. What objections or questions are you commonly hearing in the sales process? Where are people falling out, right? This is highly valuable for the marketing team, because if this, content can fall out of this category specifically, right? Questions that you are getting very commonly in the sales process should probably be somewhere on your website, either a frequently asked questions page. This could serve as blog posts for you, or graphics that you're sharing, videos you're creating, because again, we want to create an experience where a potential buyer can lead themselves through the process and feel like all their questions are being answered. Why are you losing deals? What is it? Is it is it the competition was more responsive? They had a better fitting solution? Is it price? Like, what are the reasons? Marketing has to know this. So if you're not sharing this, please start sharing those reasons. When you get a great lead, tell them, right? Marketing tends to just get beat up for bad leads. Make sure that you're recognizing them for the good ones, right? So that they can go back in and say, okay, let's trace that one back. Like, where did that come from? How did we generate that lead? Changes to the ideal customer profile or the personas. This is something, we went through this ourselves last year. It's pretty interesting. Like, we had identified an ideal profile for us, which is a typical, like, a VP of marketing sort of role. And over the course of the last year, we started to notice that we were having a lot more conversations with someone with the title of VP of sales and marketing, right? And so that was not a persona that we had identified previously, but now we have, right? So we took some time at the end of last year and said, hey, this is a new persona popping up. I know from lots of conversations we have with IT companies, more and more people are getting involved in the IT decision making, right? It's no longer just the owner or the IT director or the CIO. Many of you guys are having conversations with CFOs. You might even get marketing people chiming in, right? Like, so for you to understand who are all the players in the decision-making process, what are their unique pain points and what are they looking for? This, again, sales, you know this best, right? So make sure that you share this with your marketing team. Like, hey, I'm starting to get like a lot more CFOs on the calls, or, you know, like we need to build some content. We need to build some campaigns to address these guys specifically, right? That's really valuable. And of course, the feedback on the quality of leads. So again, and more specifics, right? Not just like this is a bad lead or this was a junk lead. Like, what about it was bad? What about it was junky? Like, oh, they're looking for residential internet, not business internet. Like that is more useful information, right? So as much information as you can provide means that your marketing team can really understand and implement the changes, because they, believe me, they want to keep you happy. They want to give you very highly qualified leads. We just need your help in order to do that, okay? Marketing people, I know there was only a few on the call that are specifically responsible for marketing, but things that you should be continually communicating to sales. Your asset library, I find it interesting. So many companies we talk to, you know, you put so much time and effort into your case studies and, you know, building out, you know, your white papers, your ebooks, like all these different assets for people. But if the sales team doesn't really know about them or, you know, have access to them in an easy sort of portal or, you know, an easy to access, you know, just depot of assets, then they're going to struggle to use them, right? And so continually reminding your sales team of like, hey, these are the case studies we have. Here's where they are. In an easily organized, it could be as simple as like a box account, right? Just knowing that, communicating with them what you've got. Anytime that you're creating new content, new pieces, communicate that to your sales team. They might be in the middle of a conversation with someone about that very thing and could, you know, shoot off an email with that, you know, that content piece that would help that buyer further down the decision-making process. Salespeople love it when marketing will send out suggestions for social posts. Most salespeople I know understand that they need to be active on social. Especially LinkedIn, you know, they want to have a stronger LinkedIn presence. They just don't have the time or resource or desire to really think about it. So one thing we do for customers, for ourselves too, is we'll send out a weekly like suggested post from the company, right? So it could be a blog post or a video or something that you have, and like here's the post. You can copy and paste it. You can make it your own, but kind of spoon feeding them a little bit more of the social will be very much appreciated to them. Any tools or training tips on the tools that you have. Again, most of the time most of the companies we encounter, many of the salespeople are using the tools not to their full bandwidth, right, or to their full capability. And it's hard, right? Like when you're in sales, you're focused on building the relationships. You're focused on being on the sales calls and doing the things you need to do to move things along. Consistently keeping tips in front of the sales team that will make them more effective, that will save them time, that will help them better reach their customers will definitely be appreciated. And then again, coming back to the campaign data. So any sort of measurables that you have to show the sales team, hey, look at all this effort we put in, look at these statistics. Obviously keeping it to the most meaningful ones that show the progress, and so that they can understand how all these things that you are working on are getting filtered into their success, right, and how they can see that. Great. The final piece here has to do with communicating. We talked about up front, setting up your plans together, but that's just the first step. We need to have really regular open lines of communication and discussing these things. And this could be, depending on the size of your company, it could be like your sales and marketing leadership, or it could be your entire sales team and your entire marketing team, right? Regular touch points discussing what is working and what's not working, but more importantly, why, right? Like, if you had a campaign that did particularly well, trying to understand why did it do so well? Was it the timing, the messaging, the platform that you used? Like, what made it so successful? And similar with what's not working. Like, let's do a postmortem. Like, why didn't that particular effort work quite as well? And constantly addressing, like, is there anything we're missing, right? So connecting regularly will be really helpful. Also, as I mentioned earlier, I think some mutual shadowing is always really helpful, especially for marketers who have never been in a sales role, right? So having your marketing team shadow your sales team and really hear from potential customers on the front lines, what their feedback is, what their questions are, kind of how they're coming into those phone calls, will really help the marketing team shape all the campaigns and the content and the strategy necessary to feed you more of the right kinds of people coming in. I also think it's helpful for the sales team to shadow the marketing staff, just to get some sense of how things are shaped, the typical day in the life of a marketer, and like kind of all the things that are coming in at you. Again, just so there's some mutual understanding and respect. And one of the most important things too here is to celebrate wins. If we're really trying to get away from the the finger pointing and the like, hey, this is sales fault or this is marketing fault, really taking the time to celebrate when things do go well, when great leads come in, when sales are made, that both sides are celebrating those things together, so that we're building those bonds and we're kind of tearing down those walls that can be built up between the departments. So I think, mutual sharing of those celebrations and those big deals that come in will be appreciated by both sides and will help to form those better relationships. So again, just kind of as a recap here, what we went over is, setting common goals, making sure that you're all on the same page from the get-go, that your strategies are aligned, you know exactly who you're targeting, you're all speaking the same language in terms of, marketing qualified lead, sales qualified lead, that as you're executing your plans, you've got all the right process, automation, and tools in place to make it as simple as possible to ensure that there's very little fallout between the different departments, analyzing and measuring your wins, your losses, taking a look at your data together, deciding what is most impactful and sharing on that, and then just ensuring that the lines of communication stay open and you're consistently communicating like what's working and where improvements can be made. So with all of those things in place, this is what we hope to see after a very short amount of time. Again, I think a lot of these things we went through are kind of can be like common sense, but applying them all together will ensure that your sales and marketing teams are happy, that they're working together, and most importantly, that they're effective in what they're doing so that they are driving results for your company. Just as a thank you for attending today, we've created a download that will help with this and kind of helps to outline everything that we've talked about today. It's a marketing plan and budget template. We've got metrics tracking, persona worksheets, lead gen, campaigns, like just planning tools for everything you can imagine for both your sales and your marketing teams. So if you would like that, feel free to go and grab it. There on our website, you can take a screenshot of that, and or as I said, feel free to email me. I'll send you these slides. These are references for all the statistics, and that is what I had for today. Amber, I'll turn it back over to you for questions, and I think I'll just go back to this slide in case people want to copy down that that URL.